At a very young age, Ayan was hunting Cerberus in the Red-Black Mountain with her tribe. Unexpectedly, Ayan did not realize she had been driven to a cliff, and compounded by the fear in her heart, she kept backing away. Finally, the loose stones under her feet could not bear her weight, causing them to break, and Ayan fell from a height of 60 meters. The tribespeople knew there was no hope of survival, as a fall from 20 meters was sufficient to destroy a human body, let alone 60. But perhaps fate did not want to see the birth and fall of a warrior. Ayan was miraculously saved by several branches. When she regained consciousness and opened her eyes, standing before her were two merchants from the Empire. This meant that Ayan was again in a life-threatening crisis. Although the merchants treated Ayan's fractures and other injuries, once healed, she had no choice but to fight for them in the gladiatorial arena. Even though she had demonstrated considerable strength among her tribe, Ayan was still not able to remain calm when facing fierce and malevolent opponents. She was supposed to deliver a lethal blow with one sword strike, but she mistakenly cut her opponent's shoulder instead. Even when she saw blood spurting from her opponent, she momentarily became overly compassionate, which gave her opponent a perfect opportunity. The opponent suddenly grabbed Ayan's right foot, restricting her movement, and then punched her hard, sending her flying and causing her to spit blood instantly. Seeing such a disparity in strength, the nobles sitting in the audience burst into laughter. Her opponent also roared with unrestrained glee about retaining his champion title. At this moment, Ayan felt utterly hopeless. Her kind heart had caused her to miss too many opportunities. But just as she faced death, all the warriors from her barbaric tribe, including her mother the Night Fox, suddenly appeared in her mind. Ultimately, encouraged by her family and mocked by the villain, she chose to stand up again. Then, she smeared the blood she had spat out on her face. Even though Ayan now had the determination to win, she only won a single match. Once the merchants had completely exploited Ayan, they planned to sell her off for the nobles' amusement. At that moment, her empty gaze symbolized her loss of the will to live. Unbeknownst to her, when Ayan came to her senses, her body had been healed to a healthy state, and it was I who had saved her. Hearing that I could speak the language of the barbaric tribe, Ayan was utterly shocked. But in the next second, Ayan woke up from her dream in tears, and this memory had long become a deep-seated trauma in her heart. Seeing this, Aquila quickly comforted her. "It's okay, you just had a bad dream." It turns out that Ayan had also contracted the Red Death, and her fever was high, coupled with my sudden departure. The pain from the disease and the ache in her heart overwhelmed her. Under such dual afflictions, Ayan even felt that death was not far away. Hearing this, Aquila told her a story. "Long ago, your father and I planted a seed in the field. Your father was responsible for plowing the land, and I took care of watering it every day. Soon after, the seed sprouted. After a few months, the sprout grew into a healthy and beautiful flower. Then, your father and I cut the flower, extracted its juice, and used it for smoking. After staying up all night, I found myself pregnant with you. As your father committed a bad deed, he was executed by your grandfather. You don't know what life will throw at you. You just need to live it." After hearing Aquila's words, Ayan's tears flowed even more uncontrollably. She told her mother there was no need to comfort her deliberately because from the day she parted with me, Ayan had already realized that I would never return. Just as she finished speaking, a sentinel stationed outside suddenly shouted, "He's back. Fakir has returned with a cure for the plague." Aquila was both shocked and delighted, but just as she was about to boast about her prediction to her daughter, Ayan suddenly got up and ran outside. Seeing this, Aquila couldn't help feeling a bit jealous. Despite just recovering from an illness and being very weak, Ayan was now able to run as if she were in perfect health. At the same time, Ayan remembered the night she was rescued by me. At that moment, she had been scared. However, when she saw how I faced my fears, get injured, and fall, it gave her the strength to stand back up. That's how she was able to rescue me under the gaze of the formidable monster. Ayan had now reached the entrance of the Balacs. Seeing that familiar figure and hearing a few gentle words, Ayan could no longer suppress her excitement. She stepped forward and leaped towards me, immediately hugging me tightly. Fortunately, I used magic in time, otherwise, the fall would have definitely put me in bed for 2 months. I had just learned from the tribe that Ayan had also contracted the Red Death. However, when I asked her about it, she said her body felt lighter when she heard I was back. It seemed she didn't have the Red Death after all. At this moment, Ayan started crying. "Fakir, you really didn't lie to me. Welcome back." Afterward, I went straight to Ahun's tent. Seeing that Ahul's condition was life-threatening, I opened the bag containing the holy water. As the bottle emitted bursts of golden light, the people around started shouting in victory. It turned out that upon exposure to the light, the red spots on Ahul's body visibly receded at a visible rate until he was completely healed. Of course, Ahun was the happiest. He had been hoping for his sister Ahul's recovery for the past few days. Meanwhile, I asked Ayan how many in the barbaric tribes were infected. Although Ayan hadn't conducted a survey, she was confident that at least tens of thousands were affected. Upon hearing this, I immediately instructed Ayan to gather all the infected members of the barbaric tribes by the river. However, Ayan hesitated, troubled by the fact that Ka, the monster that lived there, might appear. Clearly, Ayan's worries were unnecessary, as that monster had already been killed by me on my way back from the Empire. As soon as I said this, the people around were shocked. Seeing that they wanted to discuss further further. I reminded them again, there's no time. Tell the other tribes to gather around the river catchment area. As time passed, under Ian and others' call, all the infected from the red-black mountains finally gathered. Then, under the watchful eyes of all the tribespeople, I poured the bottle of holy water directly into the river. The moment the holy water merged with the river, a water column meters high burst forth within a 100-mile radius. The river water, previously contaminated by the Red Death, was purified immediately. Seeing that the time was right, I turned back and told the chiefs of the tribes, all you need to do is drink this water. With my help, the infected gradually regained their health. For this, Aquila praised me first and decided to place me in the position of an elder. Hearing this, I declined such kindness, but just then, a chief behind me suddenly stomped the ground. Seeing his fierce demeanor, I thought he might have a prejudice against my imperial identity, but the next second, he roared, and the people behind him also started stomping the ground, shouting, what's the name of the hero who purified the forest? Vikir. What's the name of the person who saved our family? Vikir. Who's the person who brought upon a bright tomorrow for the deep forest? Vikir. After this, all the members of the barbaric tribes started shouting my name. Then I understood that this was actually their highest form of respect for a hero. At that moment, a bold idea immediately came to my mind, which is to win over the barbaric tribe to my side. This would be crucial for my future plans to eliminate the Baskerville family. It could even be the deciding factor in victory or defeat. Moreover, the reborn me already knew that the barbaric tribe was considered the most formidable lifetime enemy in the eyes of the Baskervilles. Just Aquila alone was enough to threaten Hugo and Adolf, two of the century's strongest. I can use this chance to land a huge blow on Hugo. Just then, Aquila decided to gather the remaining tribes the following night for a grand celebration in my honor. Naturally, I had no objections to this, but I told Aquila there was still one essential thing to do before that. The next day, inside a cave, a human was conducting a sacrificial ritual, but what no one expected was that a human himself was the culprit behind the plague outbreak among his people. To become a hero in the eyes of his tribe, he had first deliberately infected his granddaughter Ahul. This way, no one would suspect him. Later, he took the opportunity to apply to Aquila for a sacrificial ritual, thereby finding a way to eliminate the plague. Finally, appearing with a cure in a moment of crisis, he could transform into a great hero of the barbaric tribe. Nearly half a month had passed since the plan was put into action, and a human was just one step away from realizing his dream of becoming a hero. Unbeknownst to him, upon returning to the tribe, he was completely dumbfounded. Those who had been too sick to even walk were now effortlessly cooking and chopping wood. Even Ahul, who had been the most seriously ill, appeared healthy and well. Then, a human took off running to the river that had been purified. The moment he saw his reflection in the river and the goldfish appeared, he completely lost his composure because this meant that his plan was failing. However, every move he made at this moment was completely within my calculations. Shaman, a human, do you think this water isn't clear enough? Upon hearing this, a human was immediately drenched in cold sweat. As he turned around, he saw a large group of tribespeople standing behind me. At that moment, a human still didn't realize the seriousness of the situation, even fantasizing that the people were there to present him with a good person card. In contrast, I had already informed everyone yesterday that a human was the one who caused Ahul to contract the Red Death. Before I regressed, there were stories about an old man in the forest whose desire to become a hero led him to spread an infection within his tribe. Unable to cure it, he ended up killing most of his people. Thus, with the recent events, I concluded that a human was that man. At the same time, Aquila also spoke up. Did you finish the ceremony well, a human? Upon hearing this, a human naturally gave a positive response. Then, Aquila informed him about the Imperial War. I heard that the Red Death is a contagious disease artificially created by the Empire, intended to stir up conflicts between families. But I can't understand how, with only the trade activities you arranged recently, a pathogen suddenly appeared here. As soon as she finished speaking, a human wanted to continue to express his ignorance, but Aquila was not the least bit sympathetic. Vikir, just as you said, a human did not return to the village. The next sentence completely exposed a human's conspiracy. A human, I want to see what exactly is in your pouch. Regarding a human's true identity, Ian had explained it to me yesterday. A human was not originally from the Balac. Like me, he was captured and made into a slave of the existing shaman, but later, because of his heroic deeds, he was made a part of the Balac. He had killed the shaman who was planning a betrayal and even seized all his magical power. For this, the matriarch allowed him to sit in the position of shaman elder when he truly gained the tribe's trust. Therefore, a human took on all matters, big and small, within the tribe to climb the ranks sooner, and sometimes even volunteered to lure prey. As time passed, when he became white-haired and respected, he finally earned everyone's recognition. After understanding a human's life story, I also realized something. A human's boldness in challenging Aquila and disrespecting authority was simply to enjoy the rights he never had in his youth, and possibly even to plot a bigger scheme to conquer and rule the entire deep forest. At that moment, Aquila was seething with killing intent. A human, open the pouch right now. Even pushed into such a situation, a human still thought of a way to respond. He told Aquila that the pouch contained special flour needed for the ritual. While he explained the use of the item. A human deliberately made a gesture as if letting go, causing the bag along with its contents to fall into the river. Seeing this, Aquila helplessly covered her face, thinking to herself, if only I had believed Vakir's words and just seized it directly. Then, Aquila turned to me and asked what should be done next. But now that the evidence was destroyed, unless a human confessed voluntarily, no one could prove that the pouch contained the antidote. Hearing this, a human became furiously defensive, shouting at me, so it has always been you, the one from the Empire, framing and slandering a clear and honest shaman elder. Matriarch, punish that wicked bastard. Aquila responded calmly, shaman a human, without clear evidence, I have no right to punish anyone. Seeing the suspicion fading, a human couldn't help but feel secretly pleased. However, Aquila suddenly said, I order an Iliad. This unsettled a human. An Iliad is a duel of honor that takes place inside the Balacs when internal disputes arise and cannot be resolved. It is also a tradition passed down by ancestors. Whoever achieves victory in the Iliad is considered the arbiter of the dispute and gains the trust of the entire tribe. At that moment, a Hun came over. Grandfather, you always said that tradition is important. Iliad is a tradition of the Balacs. Please show us how you protect our tradition. Although a human had many complaints he wanted to express, his current situation did not allow him any escape, so he simply pointed at me and issued a challenge. Then, at the full moon in 4 days, you and I will have our Iliad. Naturally, I had no objections to a duel, but as the one who was challenged, it was only proper that I set the time. To be honest, forcing a human to request an Iliad was part of my plan. Let's do it right now. Eventually, the Iliad was set at the sacred site during sunset. Then, with a command from Aquila and the tribal war song rising from the people, the Iliad officially began. In an instant, both a human and I took cover behind trees. But what frustrated a human was that not a single person cheered for him. He then bit his index finger and let a drop of blood fall to the ground. Instantly, 3 undead skeletons sprang from the soil and were ordered to monitor my every move in the forest. Just when a human thought he could win with numerical advantage, he did not know I was hanging upside down above him, having masked my presence. After defeating the Ka, I had acquired its skill of silent assassination, allowing me to hide my presence within a certain range. What concerned me more was that this skill was undetectable even by the undead skeletons. This would be highly advantageous for my future assassination missions, but to not waste everyone's time, I had to end the fight quickly. After effortlessly eliminating the 3 skeletons, I silently approached a human from behind. Then, I drove a knife through his chest. As a human fell, incapacitated, I claimed victory in the Iliad. However, the ease with which I dispatched a shaman elder in an instant alarmed everyone except Ian. As a human lay dying, he continually lamented. He did not want to die in disgrace. He needed to reclaim what was his. He wondered why, not being born into the Balacs himself, he couldn't be the hero. Meanwhile, I asked a Hun, his grandson, if he would end a human with his own hands, because if we leave him like that, he would remain in constant pain. However, a Hun refused. Even though it was his grandfather, he would show no mercy to anyone who dared harm his sister. He believed it was right for a coward to suffer. Unbeknownst to us, a human had already drawn a sinister pattern by his side during our discussion. The next second, the cave of the Balac's ancestors suddenly flashed with bursts of dark purple light. Then, a vast expanse of evil energy soon covered the sky above. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. Meanwhile, a Hun noticed that a human was slowly getting up. When I turned to look, I was shocked. I was sure I had stabbed his lungs, and he shouldn't have been able to move. In that instant, I realized a human was responsible for what was happening at the sacred site, and that he had to be executed immediately. But it was too late. A magically imbued arrow blocked my path. After the dust settled, a human's consciousness had completely descended into darkness, and he kept murmuring, now is the time for the ancestors' true judgment. At that moment, standing atop the mountain was the Death Knight summoned by a human, one of the ancestors of the Balacs. Seeing this, I was puzzled. The use of the resurrection sorcery curse should not have been possible by a shaman like a human. Could it be that a human had transformed himself into an undead? As a human continued to cast spells, he summoned all the pioneering warriors of the Balac. However, a Hun had already drawn his bow, ready to shoot his grandfather from behind, yet his move was instantly spotted by an ancestor from a higher position. Seeing his attack so easily intercepted, a Hun was terrified and looked up at his opponent. On the other hand, relying on the bright light accumulated by the ancestor, someone pinpointed the position and immediately blew the ancestor's head off with a powerful arrow. It turned out to be Aquila. Then, Aquila commanded her people not to fear, as the summoned pioneering warriors were merely puppets. They could pay their respects to their ancestors after sending them off. Soon after, the Balacs fought their ancestors, but due to the significant difference in strength, some of the weaker Balacs quickly fell. However, their sacrifice provided Aquila with opportunities to eliminate the enemy swiftly. As she continued to shoot arrows, the number of enemies was significantly reduced. At that moment, I was completely conquered by Aquila's strength. It seems that the rumors of her alone being able to protect the barbaric tribe from imperial conquest were not unfounded. Meanwhile, sensing that the situation was turning against him, a human immediately chose to flee. Seeing this, I sternly told Ian, follow me quickly. With Aquila here, there won't be a problem. We're were going to chase down a human. Just then, a human ordered something to one of the skeletons. At this moment, a human knew that even after resurrecting the ancestors, as long as Aquila is here, he can't act carelessly, since Aquila is a genius who has been the strongest matriarch in history. However, a human revealed a sinister grin, already having a plan in mind, knowing which undead could eliminate Aquila. Even if Aquila is a genius, she would be helpless. Before long, Ian and I managed to catch up with him. At this moment, a human was reciting a spell. Although we couldn't tell what he was still planning, Ian was not about to miss such a perfect opportunity for a sneak attack. She had to quickly eliminate the menace to the Balacs. But just as the arrow was about to hit a human, a hand emerging from the ground clamped around it. Seeing this, both I and Ian were instantly baffled. What exactly was happening? The next second, a figure whose skin was rotten and tattered burst from the ground. This was a human's choice to counter Aquila, the divine archer Adonai, known as the strongest archer among the Balacs. Seeing this, Ian immediately shouted anxiously to me, "Vakir, you must be careful of his attack. His strength is monstrous." No sooner had her words fallen than Adonai assumed an attacking posture, and a magic arrow was unleashed. Fortunately, I reacted in time, summoning Beelzebub to barely deflect and alter the direction of the attack. But when the magic hit the forest behind me, the force made my head go blank. I deflected it, but it still caused significant damage. At that moment, Ian's cries of pain came from behind me, and I realized that her leg had been injured by the recent attack, showing signs of festering wounds, clearly poisoned. It seems the legend about him dueling Madame Eight Legs was true. Moreover, the bow that he's using is made from the remains of Madame Eight Legs. Suddenly, Adonai launched another attack. To protect Ian from being harmed again, I continued to block forcibly with brute strength. Under Adonai's relentless attacks, the surrounding forest suffered severe damage. At this time, seeing that I was having a hard time, Ian urgently advised me not to protect her anymore and to escape quickly. But how could I possibly abandon a companion? As for a human, seeing that Ian and I were powerless to resist, he couldn't help but mock us. Then, a human ordered Adonai to finish us off. The next second, just as the attack was about to hit us, I raised my hand to defend with Beelzebub, even though I knew it was impossible. However, Aquila suddenly appeared from the side and caught Adonai's attack in her hand. Seeing this, we were stunned. This turn of events made a human think that he was about to lose this gamble disastrously. Then, Aquila crushed the arrow and said, "A human, let's have a talk." At that moment, her hand immediately began to emit smoke from the poison. Seeing this, Ian anxiously reminded, "Mother, that guy's arrows are poisoned. You must get yourself treated right away." Yet even so, Aquila calmly looked at her charred palm, confident that such a wound could hardly harm her. She suddenly clenched her fist tightly, allowing her sharp nails to pierce through the skin. However, I was instantly stunned by this scene. Aquila had just burst her blood vessels to squeeze out the blood that had been infected with poison. Meanwhile, a human was sweating coldly from Aquila's display of strength. But now that the internal strife had escalated to this point, he was definitely not going to give up just yet. Suddenly, Aquila inquired about the identity of the undead before her. She wanted to know if the opponent was truly the legendary divine archer, Adonai. Upon hearing this, a human gave a definite answer and sternly warned Aquila, "Yes, it's the legendary Adonai. You absolutely cannot defeat him." As soon as he finished speaking, Aquila merely smiled lightly. Then, she told Ian and me to stay behind. At that moment, she fixed her gaze on Adonai and said, "Divine archer, Adonai, it's an honor to meet you. Let's see who the best warrior is." As the fight began, Aquila was the first to draw her bow and initiate an attack, launching a strike with 5 arrows at once. However, this swift attack was easily dodged by Adonai just by shifting his stance. Feeling threatened, Adonai immediately drew his bow to retaliate. He launched his special move right away, Toxic Soundwave. Fortunately, Aquila was no ordinary opponent and easily dodged it with a side roll. Seconds later, the battle intensified, and both legendary warriors displayed their life's strength. Even at this moment, their movement speed was no longer visible to the naked eye. Just after leaving, I too felt the powerful magical fluctuations. You should know, a duel like this is something even I, having lived a previous life, have never seen. Meanwhile, a human, to avoid being harmed by the aftermath of the fight, actually gouged out his left eyeball and placed it on the branches overhead. This not only protected his life at all times, but also allowed him to monitor the battle. However, a human already had an answer for who would win this duel. It would surely be Adonai, whom he had summoned. Since Adonai was an undead, he could use Hell's dimensional aura. At the same time, Aquila realized this problem. A long-range shooting match was fundamentally disadvantageous for her. She had to seize the opportunity to switch to close combat immediately. But she had to admit, the legendary divine archer, whether in speed or burst power, far surpassed her own strength. As their arrows collide, it created a large explosion. With this, Aquila immediately thought of a counter-strategy. She rushed into the smoke and delivered a kick aimed directly at her opponent's head, yet it was still easily dodged by Adonai. Then, seizing the gap after Aquila's attack, Adonai conjured a poisoned blade and aimed a swift cut at Aquila's neck. But Aquila successfully predicted Adonai's next move. Seeing the attack coming again, she also drew her sword, using the upward throw's momentum to knock off off her opponent's weapon, followed by a firm kick to Adonai's knee. In the moment Adonai lost his balance, Aquila had already pulled an arrow. As her attack was unleashed, it went straight to the sky. But just as Aquila thought she was about to win, an unexpected event occurred. Although her attack did hit the target, Adonai wouldn't die again just because his body was damaged. Thus, Aquila launched another attack, this strike surely to secure her victory. But the next second, another unexpected event followed. A hand caught the attack for Adonai. Puzzlingly, this hand had grown out from Adonai's body, apparently to mend his wounds. Clearly, this was all a human's doing. Even if it cost him his life, he wanted to force out the divine archer's greatest strength and use it to kill Aquila, who was obstructing his plans. As the dark energy completely took over Adonai's body, his consciousness was entirely controlled by a human, turning him into a puppet that only obeyed orders. At the same time, a huge dark shadow suddenly appeared beneath Adonai's feet. Then, a 300-meter-tall giant monster appeared above his head. Not only that, but two other A-ranked monsters also appeared, which a human guessed were attracted by the recent commotion. Just as he was contemplating his next move, Adonai instantly headshot the three A-ranked monsters that had come to join the fray. Seeing this, Aquila was utterly shocked, as she couldn't even catch a glimpse of the enemy's arrows. On the other hand, Adonai's performance made a human laugh maniacally. Then, he gave Adonai the final order to kill Aquila. Immediately after, Adonai launched a continuous barrage at Aquila. Even though Aquila dodged the attacks, she knew this situation wouldn't last long. Her legs, struck by the poison arrows previously, were slowly becoming paralyzed. So, Aquila made a decision. She had to end the fight immediately, and she could not afford to lose. Otherwise, the Balacs would be doomed. After Aquila used a double shot technique, the first arrow was easily dodged by Adonai with a flick of his head. As for the second shot, Adonai chose not to dodge, but instead concentrated a magical vortex at his fingertips. The moment the arrow touched the vortex, it was swallowed up. Although Aquila was stunned by this strange technique, she was also prepared. As she smirked, the arrow that Adonai had dodged earlier had reached its highest point and started to return. This time, Adonai couldn't react in time, and the back of his head was cleanly penetrated by the returning arrow. This was Aquila's unique archery skill, which she had developed after studying the records of the divine archer and the Empire's warriors. But just when she thought such a fatal injury would allow her to defeat her opponent, in the next second, the opponent inexplicably pulled the arrow out, completely unharmed. This scene left Aquila frozen in shock. At that moment, a human suddenly taunted, "No matter how strong you are, you've never fought against an undead before. Adonai is already dead. He won't be defeated by a single arrow to the throat." Meanwhile, Ayan, who had already escaped to a safe location, was watching this epic duel. Now, she could only pray to God that her mother would defeat the enemy and save their tribe. As for me, after saying goodbye to Ayan, I went off alone to carry out a special mission. If successful, Aquila would also be victorious. This mission was to kill a human, the mastermind controlling Adonai. On the way, I continuously simulated various details of the battlefield in my mind. Knowing that a human was very afraid of Aquila, he was likely hiding behind Adonai. Not long after, I finally found a human. Then, I abruptly adjusted my posture and charged towards a human's location. At this moment, my only task was to send a human to hell in one attack. But just as I was about to succeed, behind the tree, there was an undead summoned in hiding. Fortunately, my reaction was timely, and I just managed to dodge the enemy's attack. But thinking back to that kick and the stones that splashed, if my head had really been hit, I probably would have passed out immediately. At this point, a human realized it was me causing trouble again, and he started spewing curses at me. But actually, he had already guessed that I would come to assassinate him unawares, so he had preemptively summoned an assassination squad from within the Balacs to protect him. It seems that before I can kill a human, I must first deal with these three lackeys. Meanwhile, on the other side, Aquila was accidentally hit by a poison arrow on her left side, the intense pain making her immediately kneel to the ground. And this scene was exactly what a human was watching from the sidelines. He couldn't help but burst into laughter, having never seen Aquila so disheveled. At this moment, a human began to fantasize about his future dominion over the red-black mountains. First, he would kill everyone who looked down on him, especially that Empire guy. But in the next second, I used the Baskerville sixth sword technique, instantly killing the three undead. Seeing this, a human's face suddenly turned extremely uncomfortable. He really hadn't expected that I could defeat the formidable assassination squad by myself. Meanwhile, I said fiercely, "Despicable a human, it's your turn next." Immediately after, a human commanded Adonai to attack me, but just as he was about to unleash an attack, Aquila kicked Adonai, causing him to miss his target. Seeing the opportunity, I drew Beelzebub, first slashing off a human's spellcasting arm, and then separating his head from his body. With this, I once again saved the Balacs. Immediately after, the undead army, initially holding the advantage, turned into black dust along with their bones. Seeing the tribe rescued from peril, Aquila finally breathed a sigh of relief. But with this, she also left behind a lifelong regret. She could not prove her strength in front of Adonai. At this moment, watching the ancestor slowly disappear, Aquila immediately placed her hand on his and gave respect to their ancestor. Rest in peace, great ancestor. Meanwhile, a human, still barely alive, suddenly shouted his complaint. It's really infuriating. I was so close to having everything in the forest under my control. Then, he turned his ire towards me. You, an imperial, deserve to die, always ruining my plans at the last moment. But as soon as a human finished speaking, he showed another expression, as if he had another plan already in hand. Before I could ask why, a human's forehead was suddenly pierced by an arrow. When I turned around, I discovered that it was a Hun who had dealt the fatal blow. He felt that everything that started with his family should also end with his family. Afterward, a Hun apologized to me, saying that all this was his fault. If he had been able to shoot his grandfather without hesitation earlier, perhaps things would not have turned out this way. After listening to a Hun, I was thoughtful. After all, one day in the future, I too will have to personally kill my loved ones and even destroy the Baskerville family that raised me. But before leaving, I still had to tell a Hun, this isn't your fault. The fault lies in your grandfather's pursuit of his personal desires. With the victory secured, Ayan also rushed over and shed tears of joy. She was relieved that I had not been seriously injured in the battle. But unexpectedly, on our way back to the village, another incident quietly struck. We saw the once lively village had suddenly become a wasteland. Ayan and the others could hardly believe it. After a human instigated the battle, the village was supposed to be absolutely safe. Just then, a Huel came over with her injured arm. From what she said, we learned the real situation. The village was destroyed entirely because of Madame Eight Legs' rampant destruction. But this explanation seemed off. Madame Eight Legs wouldn't normally attack the barbaric tribe without reason. It wasn't until a Hun mentioned something else that the cause of this tragedy began to emerge. She pointed towards a mountaintop not far away and said, before Madame Eight Legs came to destroy it, the place where grandfather a human was performing rituals suddenly started emitting a large amount of mysterious smoke. Hearing this, I began to search around. The only thing that made me suspicious was the green leaves on the ground that were scorched by fire. This is a type of plant that attracts insects when burned. It seems that a human's smug expression before his death was probably because he had already decided to use Madame Eight Legs to destroy the Balacs. Meanwhile, although Aquila furiously slammed the rock wall, since things had already reached this point, the most appropriate action was to rebuild our home. Thus, she began to orderly instruct the uninjured tribe members to move everyone still alive to a safe location. Meanwhile, Ayan found her beloved pet. Thankfully, it was not killed by Madame Eight Legs, but unfortunately, Bakira's hind legs had already been crippled by the poison. Seeing this, Ayan said it was all her fault. She repeatedly apologized to Bakira, saying she should not have left him alone in the village. But at this moment, seeing everyone plunged into fear of Madame Eight Legs, I began to ponder a question. Although it's undeniable that Madame Eight Legs possesses a disastrous strength in the forest, is it really a monster that the Balacs cannot defeat? So, after nightfall, I decisively went to find Aquila, wanting to learn about the history of Madame Eight Legs from her. At first, Aquila was somewhat reluctant, as even she did not dare to provoke this monster lightly. It wasn't until I brought out a scroll that the situation turned around. This was something I had found with the Rococo tribe, and it contained various information about Madame Eight Legs, including the origin of its deadly poison, the various monsters it had fought, and its hiding places. However, it did not record why the barbaric tribe was so fearful of its presence. Upon hearing this, Aquila paused, then firmly explained, actually, we also have records of Madame Eight Legs, which have been passed down since long ago. One of the entries is about how Adonai once broke off one of its massive legs. However, that was just the beginning of despair, as the severed leg quickly regrew, even splitting into two, and the hardness of the limbs doubled. To this day, the defensive power of Madame Eight Legs has reached a terrifying level. Thus, it can be said that all the barbarian warriors who have challenged it have inadvertently created this evil. Then, Aquila gave me a piece of advice. She cautioned me against trying to recover from this loss too hastily. She didn't want to experience the pain of losing any more of her family. After hearing all this, I didn't ask any further. In my view, a monster is a monster, and although Madame Eight Legs is a catastrophic presence, I, from my previous life, have defeated many monsters of the same level, naturally understanding much about them. After all, from the day they heavily invaded the human world, they were never invincible. Monsters always have a fatal weakness, so as long as I can find Madame Eight Legs' Achilles heel, I can personally kill it. Over the next few days, I began to visit the lair where Madame Eight Legs was hiding alone, prepared to observe its every move within a day. Eventually, I established a rule that Madame Eight Legs is always noisy when it wakes up, like a ritual to vent its dominance. Moreover, its hunting time is fixed, taking about 2 hours to return. Today, I decided to venture into the lair of the Madame Eight Legs to explore. When I reached the highest point of the mountain, I realized that although the surface looks like a mountain, it is actually hollow inside. Then, I summoned Beelzebub and made 4 slashes at the ground's entwined spider silk to obtain a complete small spider web. Next, I held it in my hands for inspection. I found that the cross-section of the web was quite rough. If I didn't have Beelzebub, a normal sword probably wouldn't be able to cut it easily. However, it also provided me with a great advantage. With these tough spider webs, I could easily enter and exit the lair of the Madame Eight Legs. While descending to the lower levels, I discovered that the hollow part inside was pyramid-shaped. Although I don't understand the purpose of this design yet, I feel it is definitely beneficial for the spider's survival. Meanwhile, I casually observed the lair's inner walls, where the spider silk seemed to wrap the prey of the Madam Eight Legs. There were hundreds of human skeletons and bodies of lower-level monsters. This means that the Madam Eight Legs seems aware that it is at the top of the food chain in the forest. However, I can't dwell too much on this issue because I need to find more usable information before Madam Eight Legs returns. Just then, I saw several spherical balls entwined together on the wall. I grabbed one, and upon closer inspection, I discovered they were eggs laid by the Madam Eight Legs. I realized this was the reason why a large number of spider monsters appeared when the world was on the brink of destruction. The next second, the Madam Eight Legs suddenly appeared at the entrance of the cave. Instantly, I was so frightened that I dared not even breathe. Then, I immediately activated my silent assassination skill to hide my presence. Next, I pressed myself under a large web. Fortunately, in the end, the Madam Eight Legs did not discover me, the intruder, and left the place reassured, but its instinctual sensing ability still sent chills down my spine. Meanwhile, the village previously razed to the ground has begun to be rebuilt gradually with the efforts of the tribe. But this isn't the most important thing for Ayan, as she had heard from Aquila a few days ago that I was inquiring about Madam Eight Legs. Thus, every day, she would wait in front of my tent. She didn't want me to try to confront it again, fearing that one day I might go alone to fight the Madam Eight Legs and lose my life. Now, Ayan's beloved pet had lost a leg and couldn't run. If something else happened to her loved one, she wouldn't want to live either. Just as she finished speaking, I called out to Ayan waiting outside, indicating I had something to say. When Ayan lifted the tent flap and came in, she was very puzzled about what I was studying and asked me what these drawings were for. I didn't hesitate and told her the truth. These were my investigative reports on the Madam Eight Legs and its living environment. As for the spider webs and eggs on the table, they were retrieved from the lair. The moment she heard the word lair, Ayan's emotions immediately became agitated. She said, "Don't tell me you're going to confront the Madam Eight Legs again. You know that's not something that can be easily accomplished." Seeing that I didn't respond, Ayan spoke again, "Then I will fight alongside you." Hearing this, I immediately made it clear that her wounds from the previous battle had not yet healed, and following me would only be a burden. Then, I calmly laid out my plans for the future. Soon, I will leave this place because I have tasks that must be completed, so I must return to Baskerville family. After hearing this, Ayan remained silent until I told her another plan, and only then did her eyes light up again. I really enjoy living here, so if I manage to settle my affairs, I will definitely come back to here. But before I leave the deep forest, I must do everything in my power to protect the place I most want to return to. Look, this here lists all the strategies to hunt Madam Eight Legs. I want to make sure I can kill it and come out unscathed. Suddenly, Ayan's expression turned somber. She thought I was foolish to use the word hunt to describe this confrontation, but the next second, Ayan's tears of happiness flowed. She told me that she believed in me no matter what. Whether it's a pandemic or killing a human, I always bring about the best outcomes. Can you bring about that kind of outcome against the Madam Eight Legs this time? Of course. Soon after, I waited for a rare rainy day, but my intent was not to collect rainwater, but to find a swamp lizard that only appears during the rain. Suddenly, it launched an attack at me. Unfazed, I directly swung Beelzebub, severing its arm. Then, I did not deal it a fatal blow, but instead prepared to verify a piece of crucial information. The next second, the original arm actually grew back. It seems I was indeed right. The swamp lizard has the ability to regenerate infinitely as long as its head isn't fatally injured. With this ability, I could take the head of Madam Eight Legs. Meanwhile, as a thank you for saving his sister's life, Ahun even built me a house. His friends, puzzled by this, prompted Ahun to explain, "Vakir is like a brother to me. Building a house for him to live in is a brother's duty." No sooner had he spoken than he was mocked by his friends. "Are you kidding? We remember how much you used to hate Vakir. How come you're brothers now?" Hearing this, Ahun became angrily embarrassed, shouted for them to shut up, and hoped such matters wouldn't be mentioned again. Then, Ahun came to my former residence, intending to tell me the good news about the new house, but when he opened my tent, I was not there. At that moment, Ayan also arrived. She knew why I wasn't in my tent, and could only look up at the sky and pray that I would be safe. Meanwhile, watching as a storm was about to break in the sky, I guessed that the Madam Eight Legs was probably sleeping, which for me, was the perfect opportunity to hunt it. Before this, I had considered possible variables that could arise while hunting the Madam Eight Legs and had planned measures to deal with and handle them, because I absolutely could not afford any mistakes, or I would also perish. As I leaped into the cave, the hunt officially began. Looking down at the sleeping Madam Eight Legs below, I began using the elasticity of the spider silk to increase my speed, transforming it into my lethal force, as the area I was aiming to strike was Madam Eight Legs' most defensively robust legs. The intense pain immediately woke the Madam Eight Legs. Then, I began to observe the situation of its legs, and indeed, just as Aquila had said, the legs I had just severed were regrowing at a visible rate and splitting into two parts. Now assured of the reliability of this information, I immediately implemented my plan. The subsequent slashes were all all directed at the legs of the Madam Eight Legs. But as the lord of the forest, its strength was not to be underestimated. Just the venom it sprayed from its mouth was enough to suppress me from continuing my attacks. Suddenly, a drop of venom accidentally fell on my arm, and instantly, the toxin penetrated through the skin into my veins. To prevent full-body poisoning, I had to carry out the next plan. Enduring the severe pain, I chopped off my poisoned arm. At that moment, something began to squirm at the stump of my severed hand, and then, to Madam Eight Legs' astonishment, the flesh began to grow wildly, eventually causing my hand to fully regenerate. This regenerative ability was something I had stolen from the monster that I killed recently. Although it seemed similar to Madam Eight Legs' ability, it was actually different. Once regeneration was complete, my attack target remained unchanged. I continued to relentlessly sever the Madam Eight Legs' legs. As its legs multiplied and their defensive power strengthened to an epic level, my heart remained unmoved. But this was still far from enough, because the Madam Eight Legs' speed was still incredibly agile. Just at that moment, due to a half-second lapse in concentration, the Madam Eight Legs pierced my right hand and right foot. Thankfully, the stolen regeneration ability helped me greatly increasing my tolerance for mistakes in battle. As long as I made good use of the time to dodge, I could regenerate the lost limbs. Time passed quickly, and by now, I had almost drained my stamina due to frequent use of the regeneration ability. On the other hand, this monster doubles the number of its legs like nothing. However, from the expression on my face, it was clear that victory was already mine. Next came the final plan to deliver the finishing blow to Madam Eight Legs. I jumped to the highest point the spider silk could reach. The Madam Eight Legs, seeing this, intended to strike at me with its claws, but in the next moment, its body lost balance and fell heavily to the ground. This was the result I had been hoping for, because I planned to double its legs. I had foreseen that once you keep doubling the same leg, its movement would be severely impaired. Though its skill might sound godlike, in reality, it can become a curse. Upon realizing it had been tricked by me, the Madam Eight Legs became enraged. But now, its only means of resistance was to spit out spider silk. At the same time, this was also the crucial step in my ultimate plan. Before coming here, I had already studied the weaknesses of Madam Eight Legs' silk. Regular flames were indeed difficult to ignite it, but as long as I used the hellfire from Cerberus, setting the silk ablaze would be easy. At this moment, spider silk was spread across the walls and the bodies of the slain monsters, creating a giant furnace that could be set on fire. I jumped onto one of the corpses, grinned wickedly at Madam Eight Legs, and said, "You stacked up too much karma because you let power cloud your judgment. Now, it's time for you to receive that karma." With that, I thrust the hellfire into the corpse, and under its ignition, the entire lair was instantly engulfed in flames. Recently, when I took some of Madam Eight Legs' webs to study, I not only discovered the weakness that could defeat Madam Eight Legs, but I also confirmed a question that had been troubling me when I met Cerberus during the practical exam. Why did the barbarians go out of their way to chase away dangerous monsters from Red Black Mountain? The answer was because of expanding territories. The barbarians had been pushed by Madam Eight Legs all the way to Red Black Mountain. Knowing this, I finally understood Madam Eight Legs' hidden intentions. In truth, Madam Eight Legs used the tribe members to chase away monsters like Cerberus, so that her weakness, hellfire, was pushed further away from her. Returning to the present, the series of chain reactions from the spider webs caused the Madam Eight Legs to quickly fall into the endless sea of flames. As for what I should do next, it was simply to wait for the hellfire to turn the Madam Eight Legs into ash. This outcome was, of course, inevitable. Since I already knew its weakness, all I needed to do was make sure it couldn't easily escape from the web-covered lair. After the fire goes out, I'll have to obtain her ability. But just then, the ground beneath me suddenly shook violently. I instinctively looked in that direction. Sure enough, it was coming from the Madam Eight Legs lair. I saw that the mountaintop, which had been sparking with embers, began to slowly extinguish, and in the next second, huge cracks exploded open from the mountain, and emerging from it was the Madam Eight Legs that hadn't been fully burned. Seeing this, I was utterly shocked. I didn't expect her to break through the mountain. At this moment, the Madam Eight Legs, in order to find me in the dense forest, gathered a huge ball of venom and shot it into the sky. Suddenly, it exploded like fireworks, and wherever the venom fell, it was instantly corroded and destroyed. But I had no time to escape into the forest, so I immediately captured two important pieces of information. The Madam Eight Legs' eyes had been burned blind by hellfire, and the body hairs it used to assist its senses were also burned off. But what surprised me was that there was a large hole on its body, accompanied by multiple cracks. I suspected it had been injured while breaking through the mountain, and if my guess was correct, this would be the perfect opportunity to kill the Madam Eight Legs. Then, I immediately summoned Beelzebub again and launched the sixth sword technique at the cracks. However, after I struck, I was unexpectedly bounced back. By now, its skin was still as tough as ever. Since one strike wasn't enough, I decided to deliver a few more. But just then, the Madam Eight Legs' body began to crack open, and what appeared in front of me was its newly regenerated eyes. While I was stunned by the sight, the Madam Eight Legs actually launched an attack on me. Immediately after, I was sent flying over 1,000 meters, and my legs were broken from the attack. At this moment, I realized I had made a mistake. I hadn't anticipated that it could regenerate by shedding its skin. Moreover, due to the massive loss of stamina, I was no longer able to regenerate in such a short time. Watching the Madam Eight Legs close in on me, I kept chanting in my heart, "Stand up, quickly," but this was clearly futile. Just as I prepared to accept my fate, the soul from my past life suddenly manifested. It told me that if I was only doing this for myself, I shouldn't have come to slay this damn monster. What I should have done was kill Hugo and wipe out the entire Baskerville family. For over 30 years, I adhered to Hugo's teachings, putting the completion of mission tasks first. Even though I would always get seriously injured, even on the brink of death, I never harbored any resentment toward my father. Although I once thought of deserting the group, I had no idea what to do after leaving the family. In the end, after a brief period of contemplation, I chose to let the chains lead me onward. To me, I was nothing more than a well-trained hunting dog. It wasn't until I was personally sent by Hugo to the guillotine for execution that I realized a crucial truth. My loyalty to Hugo and everything I had done was all in vain. I had once considered them my only belief to survive, which now seemed utterly disgusting. So, the soul of my previous life continuously reminded me in my ears. The only things I needed to focus on in this life were two things: to kill Hugo and destroy the entire Baskerville family. However, my past self found it laughable that I wanted to eliminate Madam Eight Legs for the barbarian tribe, a place never worth remembering. He reminded me that since I came to the barbarian tribe, not only had my strength growth slowed, but even my thirst for revenge had gradually diminished. I was on the verge of giving up. This was the result he didn't want to see. He only wanted to see Hugo experience the pain and despair of having his throat cut, because he believed that if I messed this up, everything I had done in this life would again be in vain. Ultimately, I would once again be shackled by chains and forced to walk the same path of the guillotine as in my past life. After hearing these words, I immediately retorted, "Don't try to bind me with your moral high ground. I can never forget the feeling of having my head chopped off back then. In this life, I know how to live, and I will live as a different Fakir. Although I once regretted my current choice, I now understand what I truly want. Besides avenging my past life by killing Hugo, I also want to obtain true freedom, and this freedom can only be felt living with the barbarian tribe. So, this place is also the one I must protect with all my might. Please, from now on, peacefully sleep your death dream and stop appearing suddenly to interfere with my life." Meanwhile, the Madam Eight Legs had also reached above me. Seeing that I was still lying on the ground unable to stand, it swiftly swiped a powerful claw at me, intending to kill me. But sensing the danger, I immediately used all my strength to dodge the attack. However, the shockwave from the debris still ruthlessly sent me flying. But I couldn't fall here. I gritted my teeth and endured the intense pain in my still healing legs as I got up. Facing the Madam Eight Legs, which was about to launch a second attack, I kept silently praying for my legs to regenerate quickly. But in the next second, the Madam Eight Legs let out a sorrowful howl. I saw an enchanted arrow shoot and stop its attack. At that moment, my eyes widened. Following my gaze, I saw Ian and Aquila. Ian shouted at Madam Eight Legs, "You spider bastard, don't touch my husband candidate." Then, Ian turned to me and said, "Fakir, we've come to fight alongside you. All the Balac warriors are here, ready to stand with you. To think you've taken all of the burden yourself without telling me your brother." Immediately after, the Balac warriors rushed fearlessly toward Madam Eight Legs. With the continuous hits from the arrows, the Madam Eight Legs' attack target was successfully diverted. Finally, with their cover, I managed to regain enough strength to repair my legs. Although I had warned Ian not to reveal this matter to anyone in the tribe, I still had to thank her. Without her call for help, I might have really lost my life today. With a heavy thrust of my sword into Madam Eight Legs' body, I realized that this creature's shell was incredibly tough, as it once again rebounded me. But because of my previous attack, the Madam Eight Legs suddenly went berserk, running wild through the forest. Fortunately, the warriors reacted quickly, avoiding being hurt by its sharp legs. Then, Ian instructed everyone, "Please don't stop attacking. Keep fighting to give Fakir more time for a second strike." Meanwhile, on the other side, standing at a high point, Aquila felt guilty for her past cowardice. It seemed as if fate had limited the growth of the Balacs. But after seeing me bravely take the step to challenge the disaster, Aquila knew she was wrong. She realized the truth. The best way to face disaster was to face fear head-on. So, next, whether it was fighting until blood was spat or until she fainted, for the warriors fighting alongside her, she had to endure her waist injury and gather strength for a final ultimate move. At this moment, Aquila, relieved of her worries, unleashed the latent power within her heart. A shot, resembling a cannonball, was suddenly fired and accurately struck the cracked surface of Madam Eight Legs. Seeing this, I seized the opportunity and stepped forward. At the same time, a deathly aura emanated from my eyes. Then, I swiftly charged at Madam Eight Legs, and was about to let the Madam Eight Legs experience all the sword techniques I had mastered. After the massive explosion caused by the first sword technique, I successfully shattered Madam Eight Legs' shell and charged into its body. Immediately, I followed up with the remaining sword techniques perfectly. This time, let's see how you regenerate. Through this battle, I finally realized why my progress had been so slow. Because I had always thought of myself as a hunting dog, I should abandon this life and live a life that belongs to me. After unleashing unleashing every sword technique I had mastered in a relentless assault. I burst out of Madame Eight-Legs' body. Seeing this, the Balac warriors were utterly shocked. Immediately after, Madame Eight-Legs collapsed. At that moment, I was lying weakly on the ground. I never expected that the blood of Madame Eight-Legs was also highly poisonous. Fortunately, after seeing its already decayed body, I felt relieved. So, the only thing left for me to do was to quickly flush out the poison. Suddenly, Beelzebub pierced through Madame Eight-Legs' body. At that moment, the monster's souls I had absorbed entered Madame Eight-Legs' mental realm and began violently tearing at it. When the time was right, I would leave the rest to Beelzebub, activating its ability to randomly gain one of its skills. Meanwhile, Ayan, disregarding the danger of the poison around me, ran toward me. Seeing this, I immediately stopped her and assured her that I was fine, so there was no need to worry. My only request was for her to stop shouting, or I wouldn't be able to rest properly. At the same time, I successfully obtained Madame Eight-Legs' S-level skill, Deadly Poison. Afterward, to celebrate my successful kill of the Madame Eight-Legs, Aquila gathered everyone for a feast. However, this party was a bit too extreme, lasting for a whole 2.5 days. But seeing the joy of the barbarian tribe in their victory, any resentment I had quickly faded away. Upon returning to the barbarian tribe, I saw that Bakira's injuries had mostly healed. Although it had lost a leg in battle, it had found its true love, relieved of its burdens. I've avenged you for what Madame Eight-Legs did, so don't worry. With that said, I looked at my hand, deep in thought. After killing the Madame Eight-Legs, I successfully mastered the 7th sword technique of Baskerville. Now, to truly surpass Hugo's strength, I just need to master it completely. After all, when facing Hugo, who is a sword master, it might still be difficult. However, my strength has increased more than tenfold since leaving Baskerville. As for what I need to do next, it's to go back and implement my revenge plan. However, what I didn't know was that Ayan was hiding behind a pillar nearby, and she overheard that I was about to leave. Soon after, and I, fully recovered, donned the Empire's uniform again. Before leaving, I expressed my gratitude to the entire tribe. If it weren't for their help, I probably would have died in the battle against the Madame Eight-Legs. Hearing this, Aquila smiled and said, "Since we have acknowledged you as a part of our tribe, your life is also the life of our whole tribe." Then, she cautioned me to always remember who I am. No matter where I am their hunting division's commander. At that moment, I looked back at the people standing in front of me, but I couldn't see Ayan anywhere. I guessed that, like last time, she couldn't accept the fact that I was leaving the tribe. As I was about to turn and leave, the cries of support from the tribe behind me rang out. "Vikir, if you encounter difficulties, come back to us, and we will take revenge for you. No matter how rough the road ahead, we hope that when we see you again, you have taken control of the Empire's power. Brother, you are always welcome to return. We'll be waiting for you here. Vikir, contact us regularly, please. Goodbye, Vikir, our hero." But just then, as I was about to step into the paddy fields ahead, I saw Ayan appear in front of me. Her eyes filled with emotion, and she asked if I really had to go. Hearing this, I gave an affirmative reply. Seeing her downtrodden expression, I thought she was going to be unreasonable again. But unexpectedly, she ran forward, handed me a package, and shyly explained, "This is the divine bow left by Lord Adonai. I made some minor adjustments so you could wield it." Looking at the divine bow in my hand, I realized why I hadn't seen Ayan these past few days. She had been preparing such a substantial gift for me. Before I could express my thanks, Ayan put a broken chain collar on me. Then she explained to me why she made it. It turns out that one night, Ayan overheard me talking in my sleep, dreaming I was a hound tightly bound by chains. The broken chain symbolizes that I have broken free from these chains. However, Ayan thinks I'm more like a lone wolf because now I am leaving her again. Just as I was about to say something, in the next second, Ayan suddenly pulled the broken chain close to me and gave me the ultimate farewell kiss. At this moment, she could no longer hold back her tears, and her inner grievances were released in an instant. "I heard that the people of the Empire say goodbye like that. I think you were smaller than me before, but now you've grown a lot. Stay safe, and have a safe journey." Hearing this, I intentionally said something to tease her. I never knew the Empire had a custom like that. As soon as I finished speaking, Ayan immediately turned around. "Stupid Vikir, don't forget, there has always been a girl who loves you waiting for your return." After bidding farewell to the Balacs, I came to the Red All City leased to the Morgue family. Seeing the flags of the two major families still hanging on the city walls, I knew my departure had not affected their cooperation. However, what currently intrigues me is what Camus has been up to over these past few years. As it was already late at night, I decided to find an inn to stay for the night and gather some information about Camus from passersby in the morning. Only when I saw the golden statue in the middle of the street did I realize it was built for me, but constructing it should have required an agreement between the two families. Could it be that Hugo agreed? This really doesn't seem like his style. Just then, a patrolling soldier suddenly ran up behind me. He scolded me for watching the hero from less than 10 meters away, which he said was disrespectful. Seeing my confused face, he deduced that I was a foreigner unfamiliar with the rules. But as a #1 fan of the hero, he absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to be ignorant of the hero's exploits. Thus, he began to tell the great tales about the hero. It is recorded that he could sweep through the fierce barbarians with a single slash, bravely snatch his fiancée from the enemy's hands and fight an S-class monster alone, buying the ultimate escape time for his companions. After hearing what the soldier said, I was utterly speechless. It seems that in the past few years since I left, the Empire's view of me has turned upside down. After that, I arrived at an inn, but here, I encountered the triplet sisters who had once stopped me at the city gate. As expected, their conversation was all about me, about how I'm reputedly the most handsome man in the Empire and my swordsmanship is unmatched. The most outrageous comment was from the oldest sister. She said if she could see me again, she would definitely bear me a bunch of kids. However, I still heard some useful information. The heroic deeds the soldier mentioned were actually embellishments added to my persona by Adolf after I returned, but I never expected that upon hearing news of my death, Hugo actually felt an impulse to obliterate the Morgue family. To calm Hugo's fury, Adolf also offered countless treasures as an apology. While I'm not sure if Hugo has forgiven the Morgue family, it's normal for him to be upset over my death since in this life, I am his most beloved hound. As it was getting late, I was about to go upstairs to sleep after leaving some coins. However, my attire caught the attention of the triplet sisters. Suddenly, the oldest sister pointed at me and shouted, "Hey you, the suspicious one, come here. Are you a spy sent by the barbarians?" I knew she was talking about me, but hearing everyone around say she was drunk, I chose not to respond and turned to leave. But in the next second, the oldest sister launched a magical attack, causing vines to sprout from the ground beneath my feet. Seeing this, I leaped effortlessly to avoid the vines' assault. My swift reaction and agile movements stunned everyone present. Unbeknownst to me, as soon as I steadied myself, they began to attack me, thinking I was an enemy and prepared to apprehend me. Seeing the situation get more complicated, I decided to reveal my identity. Anyway, I'll be officially returning to Baskerville soon, so letting them know I'm still alive now is no big deal. At that moment, upon seeing me, the triplet sisters instantly fell for me, their faces turning red. Even their speech became stuttered. Meanwhile, the soldier, who obviously hadn't met me before, simply commented that I only looked somewhat like the statue. In the end, it wasn't until the triplet sisters shouted my name that I could finally go back and sleep peacefully. Soon, the next morning came. After getting my things back, I decided to head back to Baskerville. Before leaving, I intended to ask for some news about Camus, but those three actually started fighting over me from last night, all claiming that I survived because of their longing. It seems that in this life, the triplet sisters are no different from the previous one. They're still chatterboxes. Luckily, they finally listened to what I asked. They told me that Camus had temporarily left the Morgue family and joined the Dark Hall. She is probably in seclusion there now, focusing on studying magic. Upon hearing this, I stood frozen. I vaguely remember that before I regressed, Camus had a very bad relationship with the people in the Dark Hall. Could it be that because I saved her from the barbarian tribe last time, her fate in this life has changed? I then asked the triplet sisters to relay a message to Camus. I wanted her to give me a time to meet, but most importantly, I wanted her to leave the Dark Hall as soon as possible. Soon after, news of my return had already spread throughout the Empire, and everyone who knew I was still alive felt delighted. Adolf had been deep in thought for a long time because my death had already brought great losses to the Morgue family. At the same time, news of my return also reached Hugo. He truly didn't expect that his beloved hound was really still alive. But Hugo would never imagine that my return was to destroy the entire Baskerville and avenge my past life's decapitation. After I returned to the underdog city, the people living here have been way too enthusiastic. Upon hearing this, Chihuahua smiled and explained, "The news of your survival spread throughout the Empire immediately. They are celebrating for you. You've made so many contributions to the city before." At that moment, Pomerian came in. "Uncle, this is for you. It's dead, but still a cute rodent. Be careful not to catch the plague, okay?" I gave a brief reply, acknowledging her warning. Then, I turned to Chihuahua, asking if the issues with Underdog had been resolved. At that moment, Chihuahua mentioned Cindy Wendy. He said Cindy Wendy had been helping with the city's administration and was indeed very clever, just as I had described. However, recently she had encountered a case that left her stumped. She hadn't even found a single useful clue. Afterward, Chihuahua pulled out a file which contained information about missing children. There was a perplexing detail. Whether the children were kidnapped or not, their parents didn't seem in a hurry to report it. Although Chihuahua had investigated the black market, he didn't find any sign of children being sold. So, the initial conclusion was that this kidnapping case was likely the work of a single person, and this person was definitely a seasoned criminal. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to leave no trace behind every time. But when I took over and saw the contents, I almost exploded with anger. This damn thing looks way too similar to a case from my past life, one that was framed on me. Back then, many children disappeared in Underdog City. Although this tragedy would happen years later, I was certain there was a connection. Meanwhile, Pomerian called me. When I turned to look, the little rat had clearly been dead was now alive again. Seeing this, I was stunned, because this was a unique black magic of the Rococo tribe, body resurrection, and even the most talented individuals of Baskerville and Morgue usually needed to be at least 8 years old to barely sense magic. The thing is, Pomerian had just turned 5 and could already use such difficult black magic skillfully. I then asked Pomerian if she could tell me when she first discovered this ability. ability. After hearing this, Pomerian began to count with difficulty, so I decided not to push her further. After all, she was born into the barbarians, and now that she can communicate with me freely, it's a blessing in disguise. But then I thought, if she receives more training in the future, many years from now, Pomerian will undoubtedly become the Empire's only black magic master at the top. However, what Hugo hates most is the Rococo tribe. Even though Pomerian is a rare genius, if Hugo discovers that there's Rococo blood mixed in her veins, he will never show mercy and will definitely sentence her to a severe death. So from now on, I must use every means possible to keep Pomerian by my side without Hugo finding out. Meanwhile, Chihuahua received a pigeon letter, and the contents immediately made him break into a cold sweat. Vikir, bad news. Hugo, the patriarch, is coming to Underdog City. Soon, the appointed time arrived, and Hugo, accompanied by his butler John, made his entrance. However, after locking eyes with Hugo for a while, neither of us spoke a word. The oppressive atmosphere left Chihuahua behind us frozen in place, not daring to move. Fortunately, John eventually broke the silence with a greeting, which allowed Hugo to stop awkwardly staring at me. My dear son, welcome back to the Baskerville family. How have you been? Upon hearing this, I told the fabricated story I had already prepared. In the beginning, they treated me as a slave, but I tricked the Night Fox into trusting me and successfully partnered with his daughter to solve the food issue. During this process, I learned all about the barbarian tribe's habits. By now, I could perfectly control them and have them willingly serve us. Hugo was quite curious and quickly asked me how exactly I managed to do it. I then told him about the illicit trade happening with the barbarian tribe. Even the Empire's cheapest vegetables could be traded there for the finest leather and jewels. So, as long as we use these abundant resources from the Empire to trade for what the barbarian tribe lacks, we could negotiate a treaty in the process. The barbarian tribe would clear out the water disaster monsters and expand our territory without charge. This would not only reduce the losses in our military forces, but also significantly weaken the barbarian tribe's power. Upon hearing this, Hugo believed that it was indeed a brilliant plan. It seems my son is becoming more and more like me. From now on, I'll leave all dealings with the barbarian tribe to you. At this moment, the butler John, standing nearby, was quite shocked. He couldn't believe that upon my return, after these 2 years, I could make Hugo smile so contentedly. You see, after learning of my death, Hugo hadn't even managed a forced smile on his face. As for me, I was calmly drinking tea. By now, Hugo was completely deceived by me. Naturally, Aquila definitely didn't want to cause any conflicts with Baskerville. So, after Madame Eight Legs was eliminated, they would start relocating, returning to their previously expelled lands. This would create an illusion for Hugo. After all, he didn't know about the existence of the eight-legged monster. He would think that the barbarian tribe was helping to expand the territory. But just then, I felt a terrifying magical power burst forth from Hugo. He looked furious and said, "But there should never be any trade with the Rococo tribe. Those bastards must be exterminated." I understood why Hugo was feeling this way at the moment, because his beloved wife's daughter, Penelope, was captured by the Rococo. Although I knew Penelope was already dead, Hugo had never found a single clue. What surprised me though, was that not only did Hugo apologize for his sudden anger, he even urged me not to fight on the front lines anymore. Even though my brave rescue of Camus of the Morgue family had earned royal praise, as a father, he really didn't want to experience the feeling of losing a son again. Thus, Hugo hoped that I would manage the administrative affairs in the future, and for the front lines, he would assign someone else to take over. This was definitely not like Hugo. The contradictions were too hard to believe. I still remember in my previous life when I was fleeing while falsely accused, the feeling of a blade stabbed in my back, and the cold stares of the hounds I shared hardships with. In an instant, I painfully realized I was abandoned. Hugo didn't even give me a chance to explain, immediately deciding that I had already colluded with the monsters. "Thank you for your concern, father." Suddenly, the door was pushed open. Seeing this, Chihuahua and I were startled and didn't know what to do, because the person who ran through the door was Pomerian. Pomerian was scared of the thunder and didn't want to stay in the room alone. At this moment, all I hoped was that Hugo would not say more, otherwise all the plans just made would fall through. Just then, Hugo suddenly stood up, his expression turning stern. Looking at the little girl sobbing in my arms, he couldn't help but tremble and whisper the name Penelope. Seeing this, I immediately reminded Hugo to stay calm. Then, I lied to him, telling him that this girl was actually a maid I had adopted at the border. Although her eyes are red just like ours, I had already confirmed that her bloodline completely matches that of a minority group on the Empire's border. So, she is probably not the person you think she is. Upon hearing this, Hugo's expression changed, admitting that he might indeed have been mistaken. After all, if his daughter Penelope were still alive, she would be older than me by now. Seeing Hugo's increasingly embarrassed expression, Butler John hurriedly helped him return to rest. Before leaving, Hugo told me to attend tomorrow's grand banquet. Hearing this, I calmly responded, "I'll be there on time." But Chihuahua was utterly shocked, because as far as he knew, only the elite members of the family were invited to such a big dinner. Just then, as Hugo turned to leave, he looked back at Pomerian once more. This unusual behavior truly surprised me. Soon, night fell. After taking a bath, I chose to sleep on the the rough hard carpet. The large soft bed simply could not bring me peace of mind. Perhaps this is the influence of the many years I spent living with the barbarian tribe. Later, recalling Hugo's unusual reaction earlier, I thought of a potentially effective plan. What would happen if I reported the pendant and Pomerian situation to Hugo? What would his reaction be? If it meets my expectations, then Pomerian could certainly become a hidden trump card to deliver a fatal blow to Hugo. Regardless of the approach, the direction of the plan must start with ensuring Pomerian's safety. Just then, a person in black suddenly broke into the room through the window, but my keen senses had already locked onto her. Then she drew a knife. Seeing that the person in black had not noticed the absence of someone under the covers, I swiftly leapt up and kicked the knife from her hand. Immediately after, I pressed my hand against her vital area and demanded to know who had sent her to assassinate me. Unexpectedly, after she removed her mask, I realized that the person in black was actually Cindy Wendy in disguise. She thought it would be boring to just walk in, so she decided to disguise herself as an assassin to test if my skills had improved after all these years. But what made Cindy Wendy curious was that she couldn't understand why I knew she had been staying with the little girl with the gold coins. Of course, as someone who had been reborn, I knew that this was Cindy Wendy's typical way of doing things. She constantly builds relationships with capital investors and helps them make wise investments, thereby increasing her trustworthiness among the citizens. Hearing this, Cindy Wendy admitted I was right, but it was all just to make a living by working for others. Then, she arrogantly said that if it weren't for her help, the little girl's 100 billion gold coins would have been swindled away long ago. I had anticipated this situation, so I had already arranged for guards to protect the little girl at all times, including experts with extensive experience in finance. Cindy Wendy seemed surprised, as during the time she helped the little girl, there were no other people besides the guards, not to mention a financial expert. Hearing this, I gave a knowing look. At that moment, Cindy Wendy realized that she was the expert I was referring to. She had no idea I had managed to plan everything so meticulously. Then, Cindy Wendy pulled out something from her chest. Seeing this, I was speechless. How could her personality have changed so drastically in just 2 years? Still, I reminded her that it would be better to hand things over in a folder next time. And regarding what was in the paper, it was information cards for everyone attending the grand banquet tomorrow. Naturally, Hugo doesn't need to be mentioned. As the family head, it would be unthinkable for him not to attend. Following Hugo, the next people listed were my two uncles, Boston Terrier Le Baskerville and Great Dame Le Baskerville. They are Hugo's half-brothers from the same father, and they have the worst relationship with each other. At that moment, Cindy Wendy, puzzled, asked why it was necessary to collect such useless information about people from the same family. I explained that, having been away for many years, I simply didn't have the time to keep up with all the family members' details. Then, I saw Osiris Le Baskerville, whose swordsmanship skills are remarkable. As the primary heir, he too would attend. Even before I was reborn, I had only seen him a couple of times. Also, his strength and cold-heartedness are the greatest among all the hounds. But what surprised me the most was that Set Le Baskerville, the second heir, would also be attending. I vaguely remember that his swordsmanship skills are not as good as many others, and he has been frail and ill since birth. However, he is the only one I truly respect. His nature is more gentle. He properly buries those deceased discarded hounds and sheds tears of grief. As for the last 3 information cards, I didn't even bother to look at them because they were my 3 brothers, who had gone from being my enemies to my little fans. My understanding of them is deep-rooted. It seems that this grand banquet will be filled with many interesting events. The next day, I arrived at the grand banquet. The people attending were exactly the same as the information Cindy Wendy had gathered. Among the more unfamiliar faces were Hugo's eldest son, Osiris, his second son, Set, and my other uncle, Great Dame. Thank you for inviting me. After receiving Hugo's seating permission, my seating marked the official start of the grand banquet. But the next second, an unpleasant incident occurred. As everyone knows, the relationship between Boston Terrier and Great Dame was already quite terrible. At that moment, Boston Terrier suddenly spoke. "Isn't the meat a little undercooked?" Upon hearing this, Hugo thought Boston Terrier was referring to the steak on his own table and replied, "If you don't like the taste, I can have the head chef come and bring you another one." But Boston Terrier pointed to Great Dame's plate and said, "No, brother, I'm talking about the steak on the plate beside me." Upon hearing this, Great Dame responded unhappily, saying, "I like my meat rare. If you can't stand it, you can turn left and walk out." Then, Boston Terrier added, "I was just saying your meat looks undercooked. It's cruel for my lovable nephew to eat his meat undercooked." Of course, Great Dame wasn't going to back down. While I acknowledge his lovable nature, Fakir is also my nephew. As his uncle, the only thing I could do was guide him onto the right path. Why is it considered right for him to be placed in the Mastiff order? It's far better than him joining the slow and foolish Pitbull order. As I expected, this grand banquet was specially organized by the 7 orders to recruit me. If this had happened before I regressed, I would have liked it as it was a great offer that guaranteed my success. But how could I possibly join now? My strength has already surpassed that of Boston Terrier and Great Dame, and now I see them simply as mutts. Seeing that his brothers were still eager to argue, Hugo put aside his authority and said, "Today is my son Vakir's first time attending the grand banquet. Please, both of you, behave yourselves. Upon hearing these words, I was shocked beyond belief because Hugo's personality was becoming increasingly difficult to understand. At this point, Boston Terrier curiously asked, "My dear nephew, I heard you've been living in the deep forest for the past 2 years. Can you share with your uncle what achievements you've made there?" This topic also piqued Great Dame's curiosity. "Yeah, exactly how many barbarians and monsters have you killed? Just how far has your strength progressed?" Unbeknownst to them, this series of questions had already started to affect Hugo's mood. "We're still eating dinner. As elders, you shouldn't press the child too much." However, the two hadn't realized the seriousness of the situation, even declaring they specially made time to come here. Just after they finished speaking, Boston Terrier and Great Dame's pupils suddenly constricted, and they broke out in cold sweat. At that moment, Hugo sternly admonished, "Has it been so long since we've met that you've forgotten I hate having to repeat myself?" Under Hugo's authoritative pressure, the two finally ceased their disruptions. Meanwhile, I decided to satisfy their curiosity. Hugo told me not to take the earlier matter too seriously, especially since we were still eating and it wasn't appropriate to go to the drill hall. But demonstrating my power, in my view, is something that can be done anytime, anywhere. I lightly placed a finger on the table, then told everyone present, "I will evaporate the excess water in Uncle Boston Terrier's cup and make Uncle Great Dame's steak medium rare." As I channeled magic power into the tablecloth, 2 streams of fiery magic flowed toward the targets I had indicated. The results were as I had described. The water and the wine evaporated, and the blood and the steak disappeared. This is the resonance phenomenon I create with the tablecloth, a skill only comprehensible to those who have mastered the 4th level of sword technique. Hugo was very pleased with this, as it meant I had set a new record in Baskerville history. At just 17 years old, I had already mastered this skill. Meanwhile, my gaze shifted to the triplet brothers nearby. I remember they were present during my first major battle with Madame 8 Legs, so they should know that my skills go far beyond the low-level graduator. It seems these 3 are quite reliable sometimes. They didn't expose me when I was bluffing about my power to the others. Suddenly, a voice from beside me sounded utterly foreign. "Well done, keep it up." This was the first time I heard Osiris praise his own brother. Could it be that he was sizing me up? In my previous life, he was supposed to be both aloof and arrogant, also known as the child most like Hugo in the Empire. Then, Seth also chimed in, "I'm really happy for you, little brother. It's great that our big brother thinks so highly of you." Seeing my puzzled face, he asked, bewildered, "Little brother, you haven't forgotten who I am, have you? Although my body is weak and I've been staying in the infirmary for recovery, I've been watching over your growth." Indeed, as Seth said, in my previous life he treated me and his other brothers equally with affection. Even when distant relatives fell in battle, he would weep bitterly at their graves. And when I was falsely accused of colluding with demons and sent to the guillotine, it was Seth alone who stood up to defend me. Undoubtedly, he was a breath of fresh air in an era of destruction. However, at this moment, I can smell a foul stench. It's a scent that only demons possess. This means there's a demon hiding among us. After ruling out everyone else, I was certain that the Seth beside me is no longer human, but a demon occupying a human body. Even though his interactions with the lower servants are as warm and approachable as before, that foul stench absolutely cannot fool my nose. I also know how to use external forces to identify demons, as their reflections do not appear in mirrors. At that moment, Seth warmly said, "I remember you are now the deputy consul in the underdog city, aren't you? Thanks to you taking over my position, the common people have been spared from the nobles' oppression." Hearing this, I expressed that it was all part of my duty. Then, I initiated a toast to celebrate, planning to use the reflective surface of the wine to verify my suspicion. Since the era of destruction had not yet begun, Seth had no guard against my action. Thus, we smoothly completed the toast. As I caught him drinking, I discreetly tilted the wine glass. Just as I suspected, only Osiris's reflection appeared in the glass. This undeniable scene confirms that Seth is indeed a demon. What is the strength of this demon? Why has he chosen to inhabit the body of someone already frail and sick? Actually, I could have exposed him while all the strong members of the family were present, but I thought better of it, as it would only cause unnecessary trouble. No matter what happens afterward, Hugo would definitely ask me how I knew Seth was not human. So, before exposing him, I must gather more evidence that is easily convincing. Just then, Seth asked again. He was especially curious about which side I would choose between the Pitbull Knights and the Mastiff Knights. Before I could respond, Osiris sternly warned, "I advise you to stop rambling and eat your food properly, otherwise you'll upset father and suffer for it." Seth was immediately silenced, not knowing what to do. As for me, I was relieved. Without Seth's further questions, I no longer had to endure that annoying stench. Meanwhile, Hugo spoke up, asking me to come to his office tomorrow if I had time, as he had some private matters he wanted to discuss with me alone. After the banquet, I planned to just find a room nearby to sleep in, but I still want to complain about this damn banquet. It could have ended in 2 hours, but they stretched it to 5 hours for the sake of formality. Before leaving, Butler John privately informed me that I was listed among the new students for Colossio Academy under the Baskerville family. It seems Hugo wants me to train there and serve the family for life after graduating, like Osiris. Little did I know, as I pondered considered the academy's plans. A figure holding a large sword stood atop the wall above my head. Then, he swung several blood-colored sword strikes at me. Sensing danger in a moment of looking back, I determined that this person had mastered the 6th sword technique. Recalling my publicly known strength was the mid-grade graduator, I could at most perform up to the 4th sword technique, but countering 4 sword strikes was enough. I could just withstand the remaining 2 with my iron body. Unexpectedly, the sword strikes vanished into thin air the moment they nearly hit me. It seems his purpose was to test my strength. I didn't expect you to actually take my sword strikes head-on. My nephew has grown up. Boston Terrier stood proudly on the wall, smiling contentedly. My unique judgment never fails. You are indeed the talent that your uncle's Knight Order has been eagerly awaiting. Just as he finished speaking, Great Dame of the Mastiff Knight Order also appeared there. You fat fool, drawing your sword at will on family territory. How is this behavior different from barbarians? Moreover, under the ugly law, this is considered attempted murder, and if Hugo finds out, you'll likely be suspended for several months. No need to belittle my love for my nephew, plus I had already controlled my force. It wouldn't hurt my lovely nephew at all. Thus, the 2 contradictory individuals prepared to quarrel until the bitter end. Whoever wins could dictate my future and include me in their knightly order under their command. I took advantage of the moment they drew their swords against each other to quickly escape from this place of conflict. But speaking of which, compared to the destructive power of Boston Terrier's attack in the previous era of destruction, it seems not much has improved. I vaguely remember that in my previous life, the position in the 7 Knight Orders was that of a count, and they could never break through the 7th technique and above. Now, at 17, I have already reached this level. With my iron body and my sword, Beelzebub, and the archery skills I learned from the Balacs, taking on a count was no issue at all. I could even go against 2 counts. Just then, my 3 little fans suddenly blocked my path, leaving me utterly bewildered. Unbeknownst to me, the next second, all 3 simultaneously drew the swords at their waists. Seeing this, I also prepared for battle. I guess they were probably trying to use my concealment of strength as leverage against me. If that was indeed the case, they were heading for a dead end. But what happened next completely baffled me again. I saw the triplets gripping the sword handles inversely, pointing the sharp tips at their feet. A simple push by anyone could drive the sword through immediately. Knowing this was the Imperial Knight's oath of entrusting their lives to their lord, I immediately asked with a tone of absurdity, "What play are you acting out now?" Hearing this, the triplets shouted in unison in response, "We plan to repay the debt of life. Since being beaten by you at the age of 9, our feelings towards you have been fear, and when you single-handedly defeated Cerberus and the troll, we acknowledged your talents were superior to ours. As when you went against the giant monster, our feelings towards you turned to awe. So since being saved by you and returning to the city, we 3 brothers have sworn to heaven, if you return, we would swear loyalty to death. From today onwards, we are the trident at your disposal. Vakir, please agree to be the lord whom we 3 brothers will obey for life." Hearing this, I simply walked past them. I will never forget how it felt when they chased me to death in my previous life. However, the addition of the triplets is extremely beneficial for me, so I suddenly spoke. "I don't need things like pledges. I'm tired, so let's do this next time. The fact that we're together and what lies ahead cannot be disclosed." With this, they replied in unison, "Understood." Moving forward, Set's body being taken over by the demons is a variable I wasn't expecting. I need to ask Cindy Wendy to investigate this quickly. No matter what happens, I need to kill the demon. Time quickly came to the next morning, and I went to Hugo's office as agreed, and things went as I thought yesterday. He handed me the admission notice to Colosseo Academy. "My dear son, this is the reward I promised you." Colosseo Academy, as the most powerful institution of higher education in the Empire, there is no other organization within the Empire that can compete with it, and the students of Colosseo Academy are all the elite descendants of the 7 great families. This is undoubtedly sending countless sparring partners on my path to becoming stronger. At this time, Hugo kindly said, "Will the triplets, whom you asked to go with, be alright? Besides them, is there anyone else you would like to take with you?" However, many people probably don't know why I insist on choosing the triplets, because in my previous life, I was their servant, and during 4 years of schooling, I endured countless humiliations. But before that, there is one more thing. I want to claim the rewards for helping the family gain great diplomatic benefits during my 2 years of disappearance. Naturally, Hugo will not forget. "What I promised you, father will keep. What is it that you want?" I then tell Hugo, "I want to inquire about a story, but you must answer truthfully." Hugo, seeing it so simple, also readily agreed, until I mentioned that the story I want is about his first wife Roxana and daughter Penelope. Hugo then realized the severity of the issue. The butler John behind him knew well that this was a taboo for Hugo, and he was immediately frightened into a cold sweat. At this moment, Hugo suddenly became furious. "Give me a sufficient reason. If it's just out of curiosity, you know the consequences." Under such intense pressure, I still responded calmly, "You said you would keep your promises, but the reason you want, I will give to you after I get what I want. Please believe me, curiosity is not enough to make me take the risk." And the reason I deliberately touched Hugo's bottom line is all to prepare for the public revelation of Pomerian. Even though the butler John told me that my father was a sentimental person, I could never never believed that this phrase could allow Pomerian and Hugo to meet. So, I must verify it myself, but I really did not expect that Hugo would start speaking emotionally, covering his chest and saying softly, "My first wife Roxana and I were a pure love. She was the only wife who made me fall in love." In fact, Roxana was not a marriage of political strategy. She was just an ordinary woman born in the countryside. I remember the first time we met. We fell in love at first sight. Damn, what have I done to deserve being fed this cringe here? But our path of love was full of thorns, and both sets of parents strongly disapproved of our relationship. But to be with Roxana, I gave up all honor and eloped with her. Alright, let's move on to Penelope now. However, Hugo, lost in his memories, didn't hear what I said. I thought fleeing the family was the right move, but it turned out to be a deathly disaster for Roxana. Your grandfather sent the family's elite hounds to capture me alive. Of course, we thought about giving up, but the spiritual power brought by love still allowed us to endure, and ultimately, both sets of parents had no choice but to let us marry on the spot. Thus, within the first year, we had our loves Crystal, your sister Penelope. But the good times did not last long. After giving birth, Roxana's health suddenly deteriorated and was eventually taken by her illness. Fortunately, Penelope inherited all her mother's good qualities. I originally thought that everything would be fine from then on, but I never expected that a sudden accident would occur and Penelope would be abducted by the Rococo tribe. To this day I still do not know why they knew my daughter's walking route and schedule, why they chose to kidnap my daughter and not someone else's. I have also been investigating the barbarians for many years, but I have never been able to find any information about Penelope. At first I thought it was because my own power was insufficient, so I kept marrying and having children, and took it upon myself to help the empire expand its territory as an excuse to station myself at the border, but it still didn't change anything. I don't even know now if Penelope is still alive in this world, so my story ends. You should give me the reason I want, right? At this moment, the pressure emanating from Hugo is no less than at his peak in my previous life, making me shiver. But facing his question, I did not say much, but instead reached into my pocket and took out the locket necklace that was on Pomerian. Seeing this, Hugo immediately took it excitedly into his hands. This was the gift he gave to Penelope back then. While he was still immersed in his grief, I threw another soulful question at him. If Miss Penelope's successor was alive, what will you do? I then opened the door of the room and brought in Pomerian, who had been waiting outside for a long time. At this moment, Hugo's heart was heavily struck. Back then, when he saw Pomerian, it was as if he saw his own daughter, but I firmly claimed she was from a minority group at the border. Because of this, I apologized to Hugo. Next, I told him that this child was found on Rococo territory and is mixed with Rococo blood. Upon hearing this fact, Hugo's body couldn't stop trembling. As he approached Pomerian, his face turned very grim, and this was exactly the result I wanted. I wanted Hugo to be torn between anger and grief, his most beloved granddaughter, mixed with what he despises the most. The next second, Hugo questioned again, "Is this really the child my daughter had with the Rococo?" I gave an affirmative reply, but little did I know that what happened next would completely surprise me. Before long, during these days, Hugo was constantly by Pomerian's side. His closeness with her was no less than when he was with me. The countless calls of grandfather made Hugo bloom with joy. Osiris and John both expressed that this was something they had never seen before in their lives. On the other hand, I was caught in a dilemma. Why? Why would Hugo show such an expression in this life? When I was 15, that was the first time I tried to find a fatal weakness in Hugo. But even after simulating millions of assassination scenarios in my mind, I mostly ended up instantly killed by him. That is to say, in any situation, Hugo, below the level of a swordsmanship grandmaster, possesses extremely sharp senses. Years later, when I temporarily gave up on assassinating Hugo, I encountered Pomerian in the Rococo tribe. Then I thought of a precise plan sufficient to assassinate Hugo. As everyone knows, his only beloved child is Penelope, and Pomerian is Penelope's daughter. If I could play the emotional card with Hugo through his granddaughter, his always vigilant heart might relax a bit. Naturally, the opportunity to kill him would surface. As time passed, my strength also grew stronger. After I also learned the seventh sword technique, basically, in a direct confrontation with Hugo, I could have a 50% chance of winning. So to increase my odds, I decided to start playing the emotional card with Hugo. But what I never expected was that Hugo suddenly knelt in front of Pomerian and broke down in tears. Even in the following week, Hugo was by Pomerian's side every minute of every day, but the smile that spread across his face completely shattered my worldview. This was not the Hugo I knew. Could it be that the cold-blooded ruthlessness he exhibited was just a facade to mask his grief over losing his love? At that moment, Butler John expressed his thanks to me. "Thank you, Master Vakir. Although I had said before that your father is a sentimental person, I have never seen him smile so brightly. All thanks to you." Hearing this, I felt a great sense of helplessness inside. Even though at this moment, Hugo was exactly as vulnerable as I had anticipated. As night fell, lying in bed, I still couldn't fall asleep. I was still troubled by the events of the past few days. Because in my memory, Hugo should be the bastard who framed me for all the crimes and personally sent me to the guillotine. On the night I was slandered for colluding with demons, I desperately explained my innocence. The one one thing I hate most in life is the demons that wreak havoc on the world, and all I would do is annihilate them. But before I could finish speaking, what greeted me was Hugo cutting off my tongue. Criminals have no right to speak here, especially not a traitor who betrayed his own family. Despite having reached such a point, why am I now hesitant about revenge? Just then, a voice outside the window snapped me back to reality. Looking up, I realized it was Cindy Wendy. Seeing this, I asked her, "What brings you here so late?" Cindy Wendy, instantly annoyed, slammed the book into my face and responded, "This is the information on Set Le Baskerville that you asked for." Seeing me still lying in bed, unmoved, she figured I must have encountered something unpleasant again and decided not to stay angry. "I did what you said, and over the past few days, I've conducted a detailed investigation on Set. He has used many aliases to fund multiple orphanages, and he adopts a batch of children under the pretense of doing good deeds to help the children form new families. But what's puzzling in the end is, whenever a child is successfully adopted, the information about the adopter couldn't be found, and the whereabouts of the children disappear from then on. If it's really as you suspected, that Set has been parasitized by a demon, then the recent cases of child disappearances and kidnappings make sense. Because demons need to consume human essence to enhance their power, naturally, younger individuals and orphans would be their prime targets. Now, looking at the report Cindy Wendy brought, I'm so angry I could explode. Set, whom I thought was the only good person in the Baskerville family, turns out to be the main culprit behind the crimes blamed on me. Back then, he kindly visited me in the dungeon, promising to find the real criminal for me, to tell my father and clear my name. Thinking about the hideous smile he would show after his plans succeeded, I clenched my teeth. You wait and see. Demon, I'm coming for my revenge soon. Meanwhile, Set was leading an orphan to the adoptive family, but as they walked, the little boy suddenly realized something was amiss. According to what the orphanage director said, the parents who adopted him were supposed to live in a luxurious villa, not in this desolate wilderness. Set did not respond immediately, but waited until he brought the little boy to a cave, then revealed his true intention. It looks like there was some misunderstanding. After saying this, Set's face instantly split into 6 segments. The little boy, having never seen such a scene, stood frozen in fear. What suddenly appeared in front of the boy was the brutal demon parasitizing Set's body. Just like that, the little boy was swallowed whole by him, becoming nourishment to enhance his magical power. Indeed, the most delicious humans are still young children. I can't stop myself. This demon inhabiting Set's body is Andromalius, an upper demon corpse. Before long, Andromalius went inside the cave. He plots the destruction of the world daily with a crow, but behind the scenes, he reorganizes new families for orphans. To open the gate between the human and demon realms and destroy the world, he must consume the essence of children to accumulate the corresponding magical power. But thinking about only being able to eat 3 children per day, Set feels extremely frustrated. At this rate, it might still take a decade to wait. However, he soon comes up with a better idea, planning to capture all the children and keep them like livestock. This would not only be convenient, but also significantly reduce the time needed to open the gate. However, this was opposed by his companion, the 3-eyed crow, who believed that they must temporarily lay low to avoid trouble. According to him, humans had already started paying attention to the cases of child kidnapping and disappearance, and the cave was already nearly filled with bones. Once the smell spread and was discovered by humans, the time until the success of their plan would only be prolonged. Set advised him not to worry about it. After all, he had set up a barrier outside the cave, and normal humans would not be able to find this place. Immediately after, Set issued an expulsion order, stating that he had urgent matters to attend to and needed to go out. However, before leaving, the crow still gave a few reminders, urging Set to keep his cool. As long as they waited for the dawn of a new era, they would naturally be able to eat as many humans as they wanted. After speaking, he transformed into a puddle of black water and disappeared into the air. In contrast, Set fell into contemplation. The only thing he truly feared now was the combat power of Baskerville. He had to find a way to turn Hugo cold-blooded and merciless again, so that Hugo would treat the younger generation like disposable goods. Even if he incidentally took some out, it would not cause any problem. Additionally, Set faced another challenge, which was my return and the significant increase in my power, affecting his plans. That damn guy, back then, even 2 black mambas couldn't kill him, and now he's grown up and even brought Hugo's granddaughter back to the family. Do you know how much effort I put into destroying Hugo? Thinking of this, Set was so angry he felt like his lungs were about to explode, so he made up his mind to put me at the top of his hit list. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hugo suddenly summoned me, wanting to speak privately with me again. Although I couldn't guess what he really wanted to say. Influenced by Pomeranian, the current Hugo was full of flaws. If it were the old me, I would have already carried out an assassination, but now I hesitated. Suddenly, Hugo's words interrupted my thoughts. I know you've always resented me, son. After all, I treated children like hounds driven to their deaths, and even though you've excelled in everything from childhood, I've never fully performed my duties as a father. Every day, all I think about is how to take revenge on the barbarian tribes and continue having children to increase our fighting strength. At this moment, I felt uneasy, thinking, could it be that Hugo has sensed my hidden intent to kill? Also, there's no way Hugo would talk down about himself. Could it be that he's saying these things to test my loyalty? Little did I know, what Hugo said and did next was the real purpose of his visit. I sincerely apologize to you, son, I'm sorry. Then, he bowed deeply and spoke of what he heard from Pomeranian. Penelope is very happy among the barbarian tribes and didn't suffer the torture and humiliation to death as I had imagined. Thank you for bringing Pomeranian back to see me, even though she was born a hybrid from the barbarians. Just seeing her made me feel as if my long-sealed emotions were being saved. Then he asked me if there was anything I wanted, to just say it, and he would do his utmost to make it happen. At this moment, I was once again caught in a dilemma. After being reborn, I had always had a doubt that perhaps this life's Hugo really had changed. In the year of the live combat assessment after the rebirth, Hugo cheered for me. When I expressed a desire to duel with a more powerful monster, Hugo worried about my life. Even though I ultimately won, he still cared about my injuries and pointed out the issues in my fighting. Afterward, he appointed me as the deputy consul of the underdog city, a treatment a half-blood would never receive in a lifetime. But now, what choice should I make? Revenge or forgiveness? Can I really forgive the Hugo who cruelly executed me in my previous life? However, before making a decision, there was another thing I had to do. Please move your head, father. You said, whatever I want, you would give it, right? Upon hearing this, Hugo gave an affirmative reply. Then, without hesitation, I spoke my request. Little did they know, during their conversation, they had neglected to protect Pomeranian. At that time, Set was by Pomeranian's side, preparing to find an opportunity to devour her. Seeing this, Pomeranian's nanny promptly intervened. Young master, I apologize, but the master has given prior orders. He instructed me not to let the mist be close to anyone except for Master Vakir. Set then asked the nanny to keep a secret for him, stating that he would play with his niece a bit longer before returning to seclude himself for recuperation. But how could she defy the master's orders? She then prepared to take Pomeranian back to her room to rest. At that moment, a crunching noise suddenly emanated from Set's body. In the next second, the back of his head turned into a deep abyss, inadvertently swallowing the nanny whole. Pomeranian, seeing the nanny disappear, also asked in confusion, where is she? Set then said she had to leave for urgent matters. With no one left to interfere, his hands suddenly grew sharp fangs, slowly moving towards Pomeranian's head.